Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're unpacking exactly how shifting global systems are impacting trade, technology, and our daily lives in some really deeply interconnected ways. You know, if you've been following the news today, August 6th, 2026, you might feel like you're looking at a whole bunch of totally isolated events. We've got massive tariff movements, completely unprecedented climate anomalies, huge AI milestones, and even local public health alerts. But the crazy thing is, they aren't isolated at all. They're actually all symptoms of massive, interconnected global systems that are actively recalibrating under intense pressure. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit four main areas. First, global trade and geopolitics. Second, climate extremes and infrastructure. Third, AI, hype versus reality. And finally, public health and safety.
All right, diving right into Section 1, global trade and geopolitics. Calibrating global systems.
To really grasp the scale of what's happening, just think about this number for a second: $100 billion. The Trump administration has just refunded roughly that exact amount, which was collected under previous tariffs that the Supreme Court actually later invalidated. Think about what that practically means for the market. That is a massive, sudden injection of corporate cash flow going straight back to importers. It's a huge retroactive correction of trade policy, and everyone is watching incredibly closely to see if this mountain of cash actually fuels new economic growth or if it just sparks a wave of new litigation between states and corporations.
It's a total push and pull situation, which perfectly illustrates this mechanical shift we're seeing in trade strategy. On one hand, past invalidated duties are returning cash to importers, but on the exact same day, a brand new 15% tariff is being slapped on Chinese advantages in solar and semiconductor materials. Specifically, we're talking about polysilicon. Now, this isn't just some random task, right? It's a highly calculated move to challenge dominance in the supply chains that literally power our future, stuff like solar energy and AI hardware. So past strategies are being unwound while these new hyper-targeted strategies take their place. And ultimately, that shift, it directly impacts the prices you and I will eventually pay for our future tech and energy.
Now, let's jump over to the Middle East, because you can really trace the ripple effect of international diplomacy here. High-level negotiations between the US and Iran over the Strait of Hormuz, which is basically one of the world's absolute most critical oil choke points, are actually progressing. This starts normalizing shipping expectations, which almost immediately pushes global oil prices down. So even though a lot of the major details haven't been totally ironed out yet, a conversation happening halfway across the world is instantly cooling off inflation fears at home, which takes the pressure off central banks to raise your interest rates. Literally everything is connected. Moving into Section 2, climate extremes and infrastructure. Global systems stretched. If trade policy is the software of the global economy, then our infrastructure is absolutely the hardware. And right now, that hardware is quite literally overheating. Extreme weather is simultaneously crippling power grids, global shipping lanes, and local housing across the world. Over in Europe, historic heat has dropped river levels on the Rhine and Danube so low that it's restricting cargo ships. It even forced Hungary to take its only nuclear power plant offline just because the river water was too low to cool the reactors. Meanwhile, in Canada, an unbelievable 3.8 million hectares have burned. And in Spokane, Washington, the human toll is just devastating, with 850 buildings completely destroyed. Just zooming in on eastern Washington for a second, roughly 67,000 people are still under evacuation orders as human-caused fires destroy entire neighborhoods. This is exactly what systems under pressure look like at the local level. It's not just the terrifying fire itself, it's the cascading failure of everything else. The electricity goes down, transportation stops, communication grids fail. And right now, with hotter, drier, and windier conditions rolling in, there are 7,000 personnel actively out there battling these uncontained fires. Taking a step back, a brand new attribution study actually confirms that the underlying fire-prone conditions driving Canada's massive emergency were made twice as likely by human-driven warming. The planetary baseline has completely shifted. What we used to think of as a once-in-a-40-year disaster, well, that could realistically be our new normal every few years now. And the hard truth is, our current infrastructure simply wasn't built to handle this new default setting.
Okay, on to Section 3, AI, hype versus reality, the practical deployments.
You know, we hear a lot of grand science fiction claims online, but there is a totally wild disconnect right now between public panic and actual grounded science. You've probably seen viral posts claiming AI has already reached a singularity, but researchers are pushing back on this hard. True recursive self-improvement, which is where an AI autonomously rewrites its own core code to become exponentially smarter without us, that simply has not been demonstrated in the real world. The internet hype is running miles ahead of the actual engineering.
The actual day-to-day reality of AI right now is incredibly pragmatic. We're talking about Meta building helpful coding assistants like Muse Spark 1.2, not creating autonomous overlords. It's major enterprises flat out refusing to let AI execute any code or transfer data without humans signing off on it first. And it's heavy hitters like JP Morgan scrambling to build cross-industry governance to stop unforeseen risks from spreading through global finance. Practical software tools, huge internal infrastructure investments, and really strict human-led risk controls, that is where the actual revolution is happening.
And to put the sheer scale of this highly practical nuts and bolts shift into perspective, $1 trillion. That is the massive financial bet that big tech companies like Microsoft, Meta, Oracle, Amazon, and Alphabet are locking in for future lease commitments, mostly for physical AI data centers. And hey, remember those stressed-out power grids we just talked about? Well, these new data centers are about to add a massive new layer of pressure to them, demanding unprecedented amounts of power generation.
So, we've talked a lot about these massive, macro, global shifts, but what does all of this actually mean for your daily routine at the ground level? It's really easy to look at a trillion-dollar data center or Middle Eastern geopolitics and just feel totally disconnected from it. But the thing to remember is, all of these global systems eventually terminate right in our own local communities.
Which brings us to our final section, public health and safety, navigating local impacts.
This is exactly where supply chains, climate, and public health all literally end up on your plate. Federal health authorities have just had to expand their investigation into a widespread cyclosporidiasis outbreak that is now hitting 15 different states. The culprit? Iceberg lettuce coming from central Mexico and served at Taco Bell. One single agricultural issue across the border suddenly triggers a massive federal health alert across a third of the United States. It's just a stark, everyday reminder of how completely dependent our fast food convenience is on a flawless, highly sensitive international supply chain. And of course, public health is also being severely tested by extreme weather right here at home. We're talking dangerous 110-degree inland heat in California, brutal 108-degree heat indices in Houston, and just suffocating humidity with localized flooding up in the Northeast. The physical environment is literally forcing a change in how we live. Employers and cultural sites are having to completely rewrite their daily operations and outdoor schedules just to keep people from getting dangerously sick.
Tying this all back to those climate impacts we discussed earlier, those wildfires in Spokane are actively interrupting routine medical care, prescriptions, and even telehealth for tens of thousands of displaced people. Think about that for a second. 67,000 people aren't just fleeing a fire, they are entirely cut off from their doctors. And the real irony here? The power and internet outages caused by the fires are neutralizing telehealth, which is the exact technological tool we designed for remote emergency care. It goes to show that when foundational infrastructure breaks, even our absolute best digital safety nets fail right along with it.
So, as all these giant interconnected global systems totally recalibrate at breakneck speed, the question isn't really if your daily life is going to be disrupted, it's from which direction. Is it going to be the cost of your electronics jumping because of new polysilicon tariffs? Will it be new AI tools suddenly showing up at your job? Or will it be a fragile power grid struggling to keep your AC running during the next big heat wave? All these dots are connected, and it's up to us to watch where the lines get drawn next. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes peeled for how these shifting systems show up in your life this week.